Hello everyone, welcome to Dell EMC Networking Tech Talk with OpenManage Network Manager. This is for OMNM 6.5. This is Bill Acevedo, and today we're going to talk about alarms, events, and syslogs. So in OMNM 6.5, you have this Alarms and Events tab that's going to pull up our primary portlets for alarms, and what we see here is event history. We'll talk a little bit as we move along here on about alarms definitions, and that is under alarms definitions under settings. And so on our alarms portlet, you'll see that alarms and events portlet, you'll see that we have these two portlets, and the difference here is that some events are defined as alarms and others are not. And so that's what you're seeing here. Everything that comes in as an event or a syslog will show up in event history, whereas only things that are identified or defined as an alarm will show up in the alarm window. So let's explore the alarm window a little bit here. You'll see this donut here. This has a little nifty feature where you can actually click on the donut and it will filter based on what you select on. You may or may not want to see that, and so on the wrench icon here, you can go in and remove that and say no chart, or if you want to see or don't want to see totals, or whatever you want to see there. And then just apply that. There's various options for alarms. You can right click. You can edit an alarm. Look at that. And so this gives you an opportunity to change various information about a specific alarm if you want to change the severity or whatever. You can add a note here too, by the way. And so if you want to have a note on an alarm, you can do that and save it. You'll see here I've added the notes column over here so you can see those notes. And you add these columns just like any other portlet by clicking on the wrench icon and going to columns. And here you can just select the columns you want to see for these portlets. And these are saved and retained. And so you'll see here the notes are shown here, which is why we're seeing that. You can also edit the definition directly. We'll elaborate more on that when we go over to the settings in alarm definitions tab. But you could do a specific alarm from here if you wanted to. If you want to edit it, and then you can also go to details of the alarm, which is going to show us a little more information. So you'll see a little more information here on the left. Some other items here. If there's any event processing rules associated to this alarm, they would show up here. That's an interesting feature if you're going to be using automation and having event-based automation rules, EPRs we call those. You'll also see here any correlation related to that alarm. You can do causing alarms, blocking alarms, and things like link up, link down correlations. You should see those here if you're interested in those types of things. And then there's performance also. If you had performance, sometimes you don't. There's no equipment directly associated that's being monitored, so we're not going to see anything here for this particular event or alarm. You can acknowledge an alarm. Basically, we'll just basically say it means that I've seen this alarm, and so it's acknowledge that it's there. Unacknowledge it. You can assign to a user. I've only got one user in my system right now, but if you had multiple users, you would simply select them and assign them. And you can also clear an alarm. Basically, we'll just take it off the screen here. It's basically saying it's gone, and then you can clear a group of alarms if you want to. There are specific things around this, specific groups of alarms that you can clear, and this is irreversible, but you do have that option. And then if you want to go direct access to the device, if you want to check something out from a troubleshooting point of view, you can do that as well. You can email the alarm to somebody. Of course, this means you should have SMTP set up, a server, and you can send it to another person that's in the system, or actually, it's just an outgoing server for SMTP. So anybody, any email address you can email. And then you can show performance for that particular device if you need to. There are aging policies related to alarms, and so you can actually modify those, and this will tell you how you want to retain alarms. And so you can see here we have options for retaining those alarms. Keep them for 7 days, archive the alarms, include open alarms, that kind of things. And so once you exceed the DAP policy or the records aging policy, they will be archived. You have various options here for where that repository is and how often it's scheduled, that sort of thing. Okay, there's also, like all of our portlets, there is the ability to expand the portlet just to get more, get a little bit more feature functionality. See the reference tree here. You can see the alarm details on one page, nib details. So you get a little more real estate, a few more boxes up here telling your totals on your alarms, rather than have that donut. You actually see the numbers here. And then if you want, you can also export your alarms. And so if you need to see those in an Excel spreadsheet, you can easily export those alarms. On the minimized portlet, you'll notice that there is a little clock icon up here, and you can see when it was actually last updated. So it can tell you how how recent your alarms are. And then again, on the event history portlet, similar capabilities to expand, refresh your alarms, and filtering, all of the same sort of things you get on the standard portlet. I just want to point out too that there is help on all these icons. Click the help icon here, and it will give you more detailed information about each of the elements on the portlet and things you can do, and a little more information about the specific options. So I encourage you to look at those. And so one thing we failed to talk about was, in order to see alarms, obviously you need to go to the device or devices and tell it to send alarms or events to OMNM. Otherwise, you're not going to. The device is never going to send it. So that's just a basic command. You get on the box and tell it to have a trap host, and the target is the IP address of your OMNM server. Once you do that, the events from that box will start coming into OMNM, and so we can do obviously V1, V2, V3 sorts of things. And then we can also do syslogs. Now, a couple of things on syslogs I'm going to dive into a little bit here. It can definitely take more in-depth sessions on this, but in order to get syslogs, there's two ways to get syslogs. And this was somewhat covered on the automations application when we talked about those, but let's just go to settings first. So in order to get syslogs, one way to do it is to go to your alarms and definitions. We want to search for syslog, and for a specific event called this assure alarms nib syslog notification. And so by default, syslogs coming into the system are completely rejected by default, meaning we won't do anything with those. And so, and if you want to change that behavior, what you need to do is right-click and set the behavior or edit the behavior and change it to something like suppress or alarm. If you say suppress, the syslogs will come in and they will simply show up in the event history. They won't show up in the alarm portlet. And so depending on what you want to do, you're going to want to select one or the other. If you want them all just to show up in the alarm window, just select set alarm. If you want them all just to show up in the event history, just choose suppress. What I would recommend, since most people don't want to see all syslogs from all devices all the time, there is a huge, or potentially a huge database impact in terms of storage. And so you may want to be more selective. So what I would recommend the process of choosing suppress. And so you still need to go to your devices and tell them to send syslogs to OMNM just like a trap, but they will come into the suppress mode, and they will show up in the event history, but they won't show up in the alarm window. And so what you can do there then is take the next step. If you do want to do an escalation, you would go over to your automations and actions, and then in the event processing rules, you're going to right click new, and you're going to do this syslog escalation protocol, syslog escalation. In Service Pack 3, this was called pre-processing. And you're going to go through and be more specific on what you want, what kind of syslogs you want to be escalated. And so you have a variety of options here. You can have it by entity name, device IP. Maybe it's from a specific device. Maybe you only want to see syslogs from 1.1.1 for right now anyway. Now you can have multiple syslog rules, by the way. And so then you tell it how you want to escalate those syslogs. Now you can do matching on a message text, and so there's some information here on how to apply match text list to syslog messages. This means check to match any single entry. And so depending on what you want to do, you can match here. You can also change the default severity. And so if you want it to be an alarm and you want it to be critical, just set that here. And then you can also do regex pattern matching on that message. There's category templates. Again, we need to go into a deeper session to talk about some of these items. Some of these are available on help as well to describe these in more detail. But this is how you would escalate the particular event. You can also do a suppress the alarm if you want to. So if something's coming in and you want to suppress it, you can also choose that option as well. So I did mention that you need to change that event. That's one option in terms of how you want syslogs to come in. The other option is if you just strictly send syslogs to OMNM, they will also come in, and you will need to apply that that syslog escalation rule to it. Now, I think I misspoke here in that the alarm definition. Let me go back to that one. And so just to clarify here, when you do come to the assure alarm mib syslog notification, the default will be set to reject out of the box. Now, you could leave it at reject, and if you do leave it at reject, and you do tell a device to send syslogs to OMNM, they will still come in and not be rejected if you have a syslog escalation rule. So if you do have it, if you do not touch this, if you do not update this alarm and leave it at reject, and you do want to see syslogs, and you have configured the device to send syslogs to OMNM, you would still need to go over to the actions automation and then run that new syslog escalation. And once you have a rule here telling it to escalate some type of syslog, that would override that reject, and it would basically still process that particular syslog. So you would still need to set that rule in here, set whatever your filter criteria is and whatever your escalation criteria is, and then those would be escalated however you have defined it here. So a couple of subtleties there in order to see syslogs. Again, a lot of that should be covered in the help. Okay, that's a very high pass on alarms and events. I do want to mention that alarms can also not only be from external devices, they can also be from internal actions. And I'm not sure if I have any here. Let's just take a look. Okay, you'll see various things happening. You'll see things internally that OMNM tracks. For example, backup failures, ProScan failures, any process that fails, ACLI action failure. You'll see here that maybe a registration type thing is not happening here. Here's a config backup failed. There's various things that you can get from the system itself, and you can also hook all of those into the automatic event processing rule automation process to email notify and that kind of thing. You can explore more of that on the video on the automation session. So just be aware of that those will also show up here. When you see question marks on an event, what it means is that a device has been configured to send events to OMNM, but the device is not discovered. It's an unknown trap. And so you'll see those at times if you're, this is a lab environment, so we frequently have targeted IPs getting traps that are not yet discovered. So again, that's a high-level pass, and I hope that was helpful for you. There will be further sessions to further refine and dive deeper into alarms, events, and syslogs, and so stay tuned for those. Thank you for watching.